From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. "600 Venezuelans are returning to their country from Ecuador and Peru under the Return to the Homeland program. In 2018, almost 12,000 migrants have returned to Venezuela from Brazil, Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, Argentina, and Chile. 69% of these Venezuelan migrants returned by bus. The rest returned in the 47 flights arranged by their government. Most of them say they were victims of xenophobia and work exploitation while abroad.
I came here looking for a job to help my family, but I couldn't find one. I could not achieve my dream.
I have been in Ecuador for 7 months. I couldn't find a stable job. The economic situation in the country is not so good, so I couldn't find a real job with real benefits.
We're going back thinking this is something positive and with the desire to work for our country and fight for what we want.
I am very happy to go back for the festivities. We all want to spend this time with our families.
I look forward to arrive there and find a job that can help my family.
Our correspondents in Lima and Quito brings us up to date.
We're at the Venezuelan embassy in Lima, and a flight is about to leave the country. It's the second flight out of 3 leaving Peru today, thanks to the Return to the Homeland program, which will bring around 300 Venezuelans back home. Among them, there are 16 women who decided to go back because they're pregnant, and here in Peru, they say they have no guarantees of a safe delivery and would like to raise their children away from an environment of xenophobia. There are also 93 children and 74 people with health conditions who are not able to access healthcare. All of them will meet with their families at Christmas time, thanks to this program. Right now, the luggage of the second group is being gathered. Their flight is expected to take off at 2 p.m. local time. There are also 2,000 people on the waiting list who also want to go back to their country. They came to Peru searching for a better life. However, what they found was xenophobia, mistreatment, and labor exploitation. In some cases, they also had difficulties accessing healthcare. This is the reason they decided to return. And there are more flights planned to leave Peru in January.
At the Mariscal Sucre airport in Ecuador, where around 300 Venezuelans are leaving today Ecuador under the Return to Homeland plan implemented by the Venezuelan authority after several citizens have denounced xenophobia and labor exploitation in South America. Today, we will talk with one of the citizens that is leaving today Ecuador. Welcome, Darwin. If you can share with us how was your experience here in Ecuador.
I feel blessed by God for having the chance of knowing this country and living different experiences with my family. But I advise Venezuelan people not to leave their country, to fight in their homeland and pray to God to move forward. I am so looking forward to meeting my family in Venezuela and to remain there. I hope I don't need to return here anymore.
Thank you very much, Darwin. Today, 3 flights will leave Ecuador under the Return to Homeland plan, and around 300 Venezuelan people are coming back to their country. They also thank President Nicolás Maduro for this opportunity, and also the Venezuelan authorities have confirmed that more flights will leave Ecuador in the next year.
Argentinian activist Milagros Sala has returned home after a court in Jujuy ordered her transfer from prison. The decision comes after previous rulings from the Supreme Court and the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. Sala will remain home under preventive detention, this time without surveillance from security forces. Her supporters say she's a political prisoner. Our correspondent in Argentina, Sabrina Roth, brings us the details.
At 9
a.m. local time, the social activist Milagros Sala arrived home located at the Cuyaba neighborhood in Jujuy. This is the same place where she was detained in 2016 for leading a peaceful protest in front of the local government building, where social organizations demanded to hold a meeting with the governor. After her first detention, she was accused of illegal illicit association, fraud and extortion against the state. Sala was also acquitted of dubious homicide charges. The activist and former lawmaker was accused of hiring a hitman in a case known as the shooting at Sobardo. Today, a court in Jujuy ruled the preventive detention for Milagros Sala. Following the previous rulings of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights and the Supreme Court, Sala will remain home, this time without the restriction imposed by the judge Pablo Pulen, who had her under surveillance by the state security forces, and for her to live in a home in El Carmen, far from the city's downtown area. This time she will only have an electronic bracelet as a control measure. The United Nations, Amnesty International and several other human rights groups have demanded Sala's release and called her detention arbitrary.
2 years have passed since the peace agreement between the FARC and the Colombian government, but there are still many obstacles to its implementation, among them the reintegration process. My colleague Carla Gonzalez spoke to Colombian human rights lawyer Laura Barón Mendoza, who's working on this, for an insight into the undertaking.
2 years have passed since the peace agreement between the FARC and the Colombian government, but there are still many obstacles for its implementation, among them the reintegration process. For more on this, we have talking to Colombian human rights lawyer Laura Barón Mendoza, who is working closely with this program. Hello, Laura. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Carla. It is a pleasure to be here with you once again.
So tell us, what are the main challenges for the reintegration of former FARC members?
Well, the reincorporation in Colombia is facing daunting challenges and a variety of them. However, I would say that there are two main challenges. One, the weakness of the state institutions or their absence has allowed the arrival of different armed actors who are disputing territorial control due to the economic resources or a strategic location, adding the untiring efforts of these actors to attract former members to its ranks. And two, the uncertainty of compliance with what was agreed in legal and productive terms. An example of this from the legal perspective is the recent proposal to modify the law in order to reactivate suspended arrest warrants, which affects not only the legal security of FARC, but also undermines the foundations of transitional justice enshrined in the Constitution. Besides the lifting of these arrest warrants for crimes committed before the signing of the final agreement with FARC are the responsibility of the Special Jurisdiction for Peace.
So tell us, how many people, how many families need to be reintegrated, and in which regions of the country are they?
Well, in 2017, there was a final list of more than 14,000 members of the FARC, which has been reviewed by a body between of the Office of the FARC Commissioner for Peace and the FARC. However, in the last year, there have been cases that were left out of the list, which imposes other challenges for accreditation as members of the guerrilla. And all areas of the country have been affected by the conflict. There is no area that has been spared from the presence of armed groups, whether guerrilla or paramilitary. However, in terms of FARC, the areas that had more presence correspond to the 26 original territorial spaces that were assigned to them for their demobilization in 14 different regions, such as Cauca, Caquetá in the south, and Guajira and Cesar in the north of Colombia.
So to understand better, who are the persons or institutions that are in charge of this process, and what are their responsibilities?
Well, the agreement established in point 3 the creation of a National Council for Reincorporation, which is composed by members of the government and members of the FARC. This council is the one that defines the reincorporation measures, which are coordinated in their implementation, processed by the Agency for the Reincorporation and Normalization in the 25 territorial spaces for training and reincorporation, and the 22 regrouping points in both urban and rural environments.
And there's also people that are former FARC members are denouncing that there's not enough programs or job offers for them. Is that the case?
Well, there are different offers and programs to make of them active workers. One of the types of reincorporation is the socioeconomic reincorporation. It's the main, its main objective is to provide income generation opportunities to those 14,000 people. However, it is true that this is far from being achieved, as illustrated by the fact that only 17 projects have been approved, of which only 2 are currently funded. However, in addition, there are 2 other measures. One, a one-time subsidy, which is for 2 million pesos, equivalent to $500, and a monthly basic income corresponding to 70% of a minimum wage in Colombia, that is to say $200 approximately.
And what about the role of women? We know you've been working with women in the peace process in Colombia. Do they have a stronger challenge? What is the situation?
Well, men and women have been affected by the conflict differently, which is due to issues of inequality and discrimination based on gender. In that order, the participation of women is crucial to obtain a truth and justice that is not fragmented or incomplete, as we usually have it. However, the role of women cannot be limited to a victim role, where you were usually categorized as the victims. But this peace process has demonstrated that the leadership roles of women have been recognized in Security Council Resolution 1325. So women are the builders of an inclusive peace that allows the creation of mechanisms to prevent conflict. That's the main challenge, to recognize their role as leaders, not only as victims.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. Returning to our interview with Laura Barón Mendoza, the Colombian human rights lawyer explains the main challenges Colombia faces in the pursuit of a lasting peace.
And another strong challenge is the increasing killings of social leaders in this country, in Colombia. Does that influence how the accords are implemented, and is it putting in risk this integration process?
Yes, this is not a recent phenomenon. Although it is one that without doubt jeopardizes the agreement. And it seems that those who support the land reform, which is the first point of the agreement, those who promote the substitution of crops of illicit use, which is the point 4, and those who reivindicate the victims' rights, which is point 5, those people are at risk. And we have seen it with more than 300 killings by now.
Indeed. So what other challenges is Colombia facing, not just the reintegration process and the peace implementation?
Apart from those I have named in legal and economic terms, the list goes on. This is a process that implies legal and cultural transformation so that the state and the society as well receive with opportunities the members of the guerrilla. However, I think that one of the great challenges is the construction of trust and empathy in our communities, which would be reflected in the political scenario at some point. So we need kind of a justice from the bottom in order to go up and see the political will to implement and to make peace in this country.
And for example, what kind of justice would that entail?
For example, when we talk about justice from the bottom, we talk about community or local initiatives, which means peace, education on peace, which means productive projects, little productive projects from the community, and different exercises of reconciliation from the bottom that creates empathy and that promotes the organizations on the governmental level to keep promoting peace building and construction in Colombia.
And one last question before we go. Personally, what is your feeling about the process? Are you hopeful that it will become a success, or what needs to be done for the future?
Well, we were recently celebrating the 2 years after the signature of the peace agreement, and to be honest, it's a really short time to be able to say or to have a final conclusion. But what is true in Colombia is that this has been a huge step after 54 years of conflict. So we keep walking. We have to keep walking, and we have to keep building this. It's not the time to discourage, but it's the time to promote and encourage everyone in every single aspect of the peace process in order to implement this. For example, we have the Northern Ireland, for example. It's been more than 20 years, and they are still trying to implement the peace agreement. It's been 2 years here, and we have more than 10, 20 years in order to keep building this.
Indeed, a lot of work needs to be done. Thank you very much, Laura, for your time.
Thank you, Carla.
Laura Barón Mendoza from Colombia.
Authorities in Lima have destroyed a mausoleum housing the remains of members of the Shining Path armed group. Family members and supporters protested against the demolition, saying that they had not been informed of the decision. The remains were removed and buried in a cemetery in the north of the city. Still in Peru, a community of campesinos have confronted security forces in protection of their land. Members of the Alto Huarca community in the department of Cusco denounced claims over their territory. Mining company Glencore Atacapay is said to benefit from plans to build bridges in the area. Indigenous women from across Latin America have gathered in Peru to discuss new ways to protect their communities, as well as actions to be taken in the upcoming year. More in this report.
Bringing the voice of their people, indigenous women leaders have shared their concerns and needs during a ceremony to say goodbye to a tough 2018.
We want justice, justice for our people. We want to be recognized. We want our rights. We call for our land and for all the indigenous people, not just for the Mapuche people, but also for the other 9 indigenous communities in Chile.
According to the latest United Nations report on indigenous rights, there has been a sharp increase in criminalization and threats against indigenous people. Officially, there were 312 killings of land defenders, and 80% of these murders took place in just 4 countries: Brazil, Mexico, the Philippines, and Colombia.
We are facing constant persecution and stigma. We know of 1,400 indigenous people under threat, among them leaders of our communities. There has been over 60 indigenous people killed this year.
Despite the Indigenous and Tribal Peoples Convention of 1989 and the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, most states do not protect land rights for indigenous people, and indigenous leaders are even criminalized in the wake of the interests of big business.
Our protection must be guaranteed, and it should also be acknowledged that indigenous people have their own ways to protect themselves, which should be recognized and warranted in order to protect our lives and integrity. In our case, we need the Colombian state to have a policy for this protection of indigenous leaders, authorities, and activists. It also has to guarantee our rights to our territory. Our main problem is that we are defending our right to our land, and we are persecuted for that.
Indigenous women leaders want to be taken into account in the creation of public policy. In Mexico, they have big hopes for the new government.
We want to play a key role in the changes that Andrés Manuel López Obrador wants to promote. In order to do so, we need a change to our current economic model and the way that the government applies its policies in our country. He won't be able to do it alone, not even in 6 years. For that reason, we're saying that we're here to contribute to this change and that we need to be perceived in a different way.
2019 is the International Year of Indigenous Languages. Women, who are the main channel of knowledge, customs, and native languages, will play a key role in this recognition and in the need for the respect of their people's rights.
Brazilian President-elect Jair Bolsonaro has said that he hopes to guarantee gun possession by decree. 3 days before assuming the presidency, Bolsonaro has said on social media that he wants to allow people without criminal records to own weapons. The current law allows gun ownership at home, but there is no right to carry firearms in public. Bolsonaro promised to change the law in his electoral campaign and say that a gun is a guarantee of freedom. Left-wing groups are coming together to resist against Jair Bolsonaro. They are worried social policies will suffer a setback with the new incoming government.
Democratic, progressive and left parties have come together in Brazil to the political, economical and social crisis in the country and to oppose the conservative wave that is returning with the president-elect Jair Bolsonaro.
The left-wing groups in the country are building a platform to defend its people and the values of this generous society. We want to build a more fair society that can resist what will happen in the future. Brazil has lived moments of tension during these last years. People need to resist what is coming and fight for Brazil.
Several parties in the parliament are looking to create an observatory for democracy aimed at defining actions to resist against the government of Bolsonaro.
The new president of Brazil will take us down a bad path. He's returning to the years of the Cold War in the 50s and the 60s, with its anti-communism stand. That doesn't reflect the reality in which we are living. It's time to foster a dialogue and also time for the people committed to justice and life to come together. We need to work for the most vulnerable communities so they can exercise their fundamental rights.
Brazilians are also worried that the incoming government will reduce its support to social programs.
The sale and use of fireworks in the Galapagos Islands have been banned to protect its unique wildlife. Conservationists say pyrotechnic events cause elevated heart rates, trembling, and anxiety on the animals. The measure also bans the transportation of fireworks to the islands. The campaign against the use of pyrotechnia in the archipelago began in 2017. More news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. Polling stations have been set up in the Democratic Republic of Congo on the eve of historic presidential elections. There was 1 week delay due to a fire at an electoral commission depot that destroyed 80% of the voting machines and ballots in the capital, Kinshasa. Repeated delays have spread frustration among Congolese citizens. Voters are still worried about the lack of machines. They also question the motives of canceling elections in 3 cities, allegedly due to Ebola and conflict.
The CENI needs to take the time to explain to us what happens if a large part of the population can't vote. Are they going to annul the election, or will there be continuity during the months in between? There is total confusion with this CENI calendar, and we don't know where it's going.
As part of the UN brokered peace agreement, Houthi forces have started to withdraw from Yemen's port city of Hodeida. With a ceasefire in place, the Houthi forces have handed the port of the Yemeni Coast Guard. This is the first step in implementing the agreement signed early this month in Sweden.
Today, the Army and Popular Committees transfer control of the port to the Interior Ministry's Coast Guards to protect it, and the exit of the fighters that used to protect the port and their redeployment according to the Sweden agreement. The agreement that states that there should be redeployment to protect this city.
Thousands of residents in the Nigerian town of Baga have fled after Boko Haram militants and Nigerian troops clashed in the area. At least 10 people have been killed in the latest confrontation in the area surrounding Lake Chad. The Nigerian army says the militants attacked a military base. Residents have taken refuge in the state capital. Mourners in Gaza have held the funeral of 26-year-old Palestinian Karam Fayyad, who was killed by Israeli forces earlier this week. Fayyad was shot and killed during weekly right to return protests. 6 other people were injured by Israeli fire. More than 200 Palestinians have been killed since the weekly demonstrations began on March 30th. Egyptian security forces have killed 40 suspected militants a day after a bomb attack hit the city of Giza. We have more on this and other headlines from around the world.
Egypt has confirmed security forces have killed 40 suspect militants in 3 separate incidents in North Sinai and Giza, a day after a deadly bombing on a Vietnamese tourist bus killed 4 people. Authorities didn't say whether those killed were connected to the incident, but say they were planning a series of attacks on state institutions and tourism spots. Meanwhile, the victims of the bomb blast are being treated by the Harem Hospital in Giza. The Irish Prime Minister, Leo Badara, has announced that the mass graves found in all Catholic Rome homes for unmarried mothers will be exhumed in the middle of 2019. The Prime Minister said the executive is working on legislation to open the mass grave with hundreds of bodies found in 2014 in the home run by the Catholic Church between 1925 and 1961. Ballots and voting material has been distributed in Bangladesh a day before the country's general election. Law enforcement officers and officials were seen carrying boxes of electronic voting materials and machines and bringing them across the capital of Dhaka to beds set up in ballot booths. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina Awami League, seeking a third straight term in power, is predicted to win.
We came here to collect the electronic voting machines. Now they are all here, waiting to go to a center with our officers, along with the members of law enforcement agencies.
Rescue workers have tried to descend into a coal mine in India to reach 15 miners who have been trapped underground for over 2 weeks. A team of divers entered the flooded tunnels to examine water levels, but are yet to find any sign of the trapped miner. The mine is an illegal pit common in the region.
Yellow vest protesters in France have rallied for a 7th weekend expressing their displeasure with the government of President Emmanuel Macron. Demonstrations took place on Paris' Champs-Élysées Avenue, and clashes with security forces have been reported across the country. Almost 24,000 people have rallied this Saturday, around 1,000 in the capital. Some say the movement is losing steam, but activists deny the claim. And confrontations between protesters and security forces were reported in the city of Nantes, in the west of France. Riot police were deployed and tear gas was shot at the yellow vest demonstrators. Ancient artifacts damaged during the Syrian civil war are slowly being restored into their former glory. A team at the Damascus National Museum are working hard to restore about 500 pieces of ancient artifacts damaged over the country's civil war. The team, made up by only 10 people of restoration experts, used lime glue to repair the damaged parts. Now that life is returning to normal, many museums are reopening across the country. And with this, we come to the end of this news brief. This and many other stories you can find at our website at telestorenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.